Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers at SF Indie Fest's Green Film Festival of San Francisco. As you can see here with this kind of virtual Q&A, we're still in kind of operating in the pandemic world of doing screenings both live, in person, and also here virtually. And you've just had the chance to see a wonderful set of films, the new Environmentalists, and we're lucky enough to have two of the filmmakers here. Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Will.
Hi.
So maybe a good place to start is, each of these films showcase important environmental activists around the world who have received the Goldman Environmental Prize last year. Can you give us a little bit of setup for what was the inspiration for the Goldman Environmental Prize and how these kind of people are chosen?
Yeah, the Goldman Environmental Prize was something that was founded by Richard and Rhoda Goldman, their San Francisco family. I think they're probably coming up on their 33rd year, and they decided they wanted to do something to honor grassroots environmental activists around the world who achieved a seemingly unachievable goal, with the idea that maybe we can do something that's like the Nobel Prize for the environmental world. And so every year they recognize 6 people from all the major populated areas of the world: Central and South America, North America, Asia, Europe, and island nations. I don't think I'm leaving anything else out. And so they're truly remarkable people. And Matt, do you have anything you want to add on to that?
No, I think that's good backstory. I'm kind of the new kid on the block, so I'll let Will kind of represent.
Very nice. And well, you may be a good place to start is it. So how do you kind of hit the ground running with these stories in the sense of these different people are kind of recognized and awarded, and these videos are often, these documentaries are often shown at the award ceremony. And so I imagine there isn't a whole lot of time to kind of get things together and tell stories and some very far-flung parts of it. So what's the kind of production like, and how do you tell these really beautiful stories in the way that you do with juggling all these kind of production needs?
Matt, why don't you start, and then I'll pick up where you leave off.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's really fun work, but like you said, it's a pretty tight deadline. We receive our assignments usually in November, and we have to have our pieces completed usually by April, early April. But we look forward to it every year. These stories are so amazing. The people we get to work with are incredible. The work that they're doing is so important. So I think we come into it every year really excited to learn what the stories are, and we jump right into it. You make contact with the prize winner, obviously, and you start coordinating for the shoot. And I think in most cases we're filming for about 5 days with the winners, and ultimately we end up with these 5-minute segments.
One of the things that was interesting early on, we've been making these films for 18 years now. As independent filmmakers, we're lucky to have such a wonderful gig, because we get to travel around and tell stories of these truly remarkable people who have achieved so much, and they inspire us to become better people and to want to do more. And they tell us, well, you guys are storytellers. That's what you do really well. Keep doing what you're doing. But early on, there was this sort of perception among the team of filmmakers. There are always 3 producer directors who each tell 2 of the 6 stories, that one story might be better than another, or a location might be more appealing for whatever reason. And we would sort of debate and in a way compete for who gets what. And John Antonelli, our partner who's not here with us today, is always great in finding equitable solutions. And so he said, well, let's force rank our choices. Everyone lists their number 1 choice and their least favorite choice, and then your number 2 choice. And you're guaranteed to get either number 1 or 2, and hopefully not have to do a story that you're less interested in. Well, what we realized really after the first year was every story is incredible. And even the one that you perceive as not being so interesting, working in a garbage dump in Egypt, not exactly a romantic location or story, these are as interesting, one is as interesting as another. And in fact, you always end up with a surprise that someone just ends up being even more exemplary than someone else. So you know what I mean? There's no dud, and we no longer have that kind of competition, but we still, honor that idea that you're going to get to tell one of your top two stories, which is really enjoyable for us.
Well, I always love just how each piece kind of fits together as this collective whole, but kind of recognizes the kind of unique aspects of each of the kind of characters and story that you're telling. Filming in this sort of environment, I'm sure is never easy, but in the last 2 years with COVID and the pandemic, I'm sure has presented its own challenges for these films that have seen today. Any particular kind of war stories or interesting challenges you guys had to deal with telling these last year's stories?
I went to Ecuador, and I went and worked in the community of Nemanpare, which is in the headwaters of the Amazon, very remote. We lived in the jungle with the community, what we would consider to be more of a really rugged, almost primitive existence. But that's an oversimplification, right? I mean, while the people are living on the land and off of the land, they have satellite phone technology and so forth. But traveling to a remote location, you have to think of bringing everything, and on some level, bringing duplicates, because if a piece of equipment goes down, then you have to be prepared for anything that might happen. So, maybe the greatest challenge there was flying on these small planes, and we could only have a total of 750 pounds, which was including the weight of myself, my cinematographer, my sound recordist, and all of the gear. So, we were weighing everything, and whatever. It's kind of liberating, because when you don't have the ability to bring all the lights and all the equipment that you need, you kind of pare it down to the minimum. And storytelling, visual storytelling is visual storytelling, no matter how you do it. But kind of something that was unique there was how the people themselves have learned to be filmmakers. And so we were able to collaborate with some young filmmakers there who were drone operators, who had filmed a lot of incredible footage of the history of the story. So it was sort of, we were expecting it to be one of the more rough and rugged trips we would have ever gone on. And it was on some level, but the people there just took such good care of us. And at the end of our week that we were there with them, maybe we were there for 9 days, they said, you guys were unique. Most people who come here, because it's so remote and so different, at some point have like an anxiety attack. And you guys were great. You handled it all with grace, and you ate all the food, and you didn't freak out, once. And so hats off to you. Yeah.
I just want to add that the films we watched in today's screening we actually completed right before COVID, right? So we did get to travel for all of these stories, which is the way we like it, because we get to go ourselves and meet these people and really get a feel for the stories and a sense of the prize winner that we're covering. It got really difficult during COVID, but maybe we can save that for next year's screening, because that would probably be those films. I do want to add, I produced Lady Pesha's story in today's screening, and same thing as really not quite as remote as Will's story in the jungles there, but we were in a really amazing place in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, really far out of the way. And you have other things you got to deal with, like federale stops, and they're looking at all the gear in the back of your van, and they ask 1,000 questions, I think, trying to probably get a little something from you. But I think the key in making these shoots often so successful is working with locals from the area, like Will said. In Lady Pesha's story, there was also an amazing crew of young filmmakers there supporting their organization and the work they're doing. And we got to hire two locals from Mexico, and having locals on your crew always gives you kind of that that local insight and knowledge, and just makes things go a lot smoother. And you get to make great friends all around the world as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. You mentioned the kind of police stops and things. I guess it does raise just a question of like, with just the kind of changing world, the threats that are kind of face journalists have kind of increased over time. And, by the nature of these films, while they're kind of character portraits, these activists often are doing, are political activists in the sense of often going against people in authority. And so how do you kind of navigate that in the sense of being able to tell the story and also be able to do it safely? And also when these characters receive notice that they're being awarded the Goldman Prize, how does that kind of affect the way that they are able to kind of operate in their own countries?
Well, one of the interesting things is the risk, the threat. Certainly some of these prize winners are at threat. And the Goldman Prize themselves does a risk analysis. When they do the research into determining who they're going to give the prize to, if there's a determination made that the prize winners may be at risk, if that's a known factor, the security firm does a risk analysis. They go in, they meet with the prize winner, they do a complete sort of investigation, if you will, and then determine how best to protect those individuals. And that has to do with everything from how the story is told and how you present the story to the press, to perhaps these people need a security system put into their home. There are times where I've worked on shoots where we had to hire security, where we literally had, the term security is sort of the soft term for bodyguards. Because we hire local people, as Matt pointed out, and I always hire a local field producer or fixer, and we collaborate with some kind of a nonprofit NGO, non-governmental organization that's working with the prize winners, that supports their work. We have the best knowledge and most up-to-date information about any potential security risks, any threats that might exist. And so from the outside looking in, when people hear some of these stories, they think that we're brave heroes risking our lives, and we're not. I mean, these people we're making films about are brave heroes who are at times risking their lives, but we're calculating the risk and going in with protection when we need it, being careful and being aware of what the issues are in terms of sensitivity. I don't know, Matt, I'm sure Lady Pesh must have had some security questions or issues there. Was that anything that came up for you?
Yeah, you can feel the vibe sometimes. You get the sense that, there are segments of the community that these activists are working in that are in opposition to them and their work. And I think we picked up on that with her story. It never felt dangerous at any point. But I know there was an element of risk for, there is an element of risk for her in the work that she's doing. And I think that's often the case with a lot of our prize winners. But I think for me, it's really about good communication with the prize winner and listening to what their concerns are. If anybody understands the environment and the situation, it's them. And so really kind of letting them take lead on where we can go, where we should go, when to put the cameras away, when it's okay to film, and that sort of thing.
Cool. Well, as we come to the end of the Q&A, there are two last questions I'd like to kind of pose to you. Since each of these folks have received the Goldman Prize, is there any updates on any of the characters that you might want to share?
Yeah, I can tell you that Chibeze Ezekiel in Accra, Ghana, was appointed to the board of 350.org. And so it's a large, US based, it was formed here, environmental organization that's now international in scope. And so that's kind of a wonderful thing that he's seen as a thought leader on a global level, and he's there. And that's to, no small part because of the fact that he wants to empower young people to be aware of the environment and to fight for the environment. And I think that's well represented in our film. He went to the COP conference in Great Britain over the summer, and he brought with him a a group of young people, like young school-age children with him, as well as his, young 20 and 30-year-old team. And they were there, representing Ghana, the government, and 350 and Planet Earth for the young people. And in Ecuador, the Waorani people survived COVID, and people from the oil industry who want the oil that's under their land, that was their successful fight in stopping incursion of the oil companies, sent people in who had COVID intentionally. And, that happened throughout the indigenous communities in Ecuador with the hope of taking out some of the wise elders and lots of young people. And the Waorani community and many other indigenous communities there used a combination of modern medicine and, traditional medicine from the rainforest to cure COVID. And luckily, I think they did not lose anyone in the community. And so they continue now, and they're supporting other indigenous communities based on their legal win to fight for their rights. And so there's going to be some big news coming up of a couple of other communities that have had successful fights in the last 6 months.
Very cool. And Matt, any updates from the Yucatan?
Yeah, Lady Pesh continues to be an advocate for her community. She was featured in a feature-length documentary that is doing its rounds in the film festival circuits and is doing really well. And that was produced by a local filmmaker there, which is really helping to get their cause additional exposure. She was, I know, helped a bunch in her Mayan communities when a hurricane struck the Yucatan. I think that was a year and a half or so ago. And their big fight now is the Tren Maya. The Mexican government is trying to push forward the development of a train system running through the Yucatan that would kind of really bring in a lot of development as well as exploitation of their resources. And the Mayan communities in the peninsula have been actively fighting that, and she's really involved with that as well.
Very cool. Well, thanks for championing these great activists and telling these stories. And thanks again, Will and Matt.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure. We appreciate your programming the film.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day, guys.